can say Habsburg or Habsburg, depending on whether you want the bee to be alive or dead and fall down. It's spelled in either way. We're talking about the same family here. We've been talking about them quite a bit. You just don't know we've been talking about the Habsburgs. There are at least two that you should know at this point. So, these Habsburgs are reigning in lots of different places, and I'm only including, to be honest with you, kings and queens. And it's going to be a lot to write down. First of all, let's talk about the one exception to that. There is something called Austria. What is Austria today in 2011? It's a country. Back then it was not a country. It was an archduchy. It was like bigger than a duke, smaller than a king. It's called an archduchy. So I am going to include that, just because when you see it on maps, you're going to be like, it's going to often say Austrian Empire, but that's not a correct name. Maps always get it wrong. Even your book, your author gets it shockingly wrong. The Habsburgs were Austrians. They're from there. And they controlled all of what we would call Austria today, and much bigger than that. All these Austrian lands. From 1278 to 1804. 500 years. And then, when Austria actually became an empire in 1804, they controlled it until 1918. So they really controlled Austria for about 600 years. Quite a long time. But technically they weren't kings. We're going to put them down anyway, because when you see the size of the land, you're going to be like, okay, I respect that. Hungary, 1526 to 1918. They were also the king of Hungary. Now, the Habsburgs were also the Holy Roman Emperors from 1452 to 1804. Name an emperor in that time period. Like, who's emperor during the Reformation? Charles V. That guy's a Habsburg. We're going to talk about him in a second. Now, let me be very clear. If you own the Austrian lands, you are also the Holy Roman Emperor automatically. So it's pretty cool. Like, if you die and you're the Habsburg and you're the Archduke of Austria, you are also automatically the Holy Roman Emperor. It just got handed down like that. Yeah, well, it's more, I mean, it's inherited monarchy. Inherited monarchy is the ultimate form of nepotism. When I die, my son, even if he is an idiot, gets to be king. Sure, that's nepotism. It's called hereditary monarchy. Bohemia. Do you remember what Bohemia is? Who was a Bohemian? A Bohemian troublemaker. They killed him at the Council of Constance.
John Hus.
John Hus. John Hus or John Hus, yes. That little kingdom was part of the Holy Roman Empire. Croatia was technically a kingdom. Croatia was a little C-shaped country. They owned that, 1527, 1868. And Galicia, not to be confused with Galicia. Where's Galicia? España. We're talking about Galicia. Galicia is a little kingdom right in here. And essentially part of the Holy Roman Empire. Everything on this map right here goes from in between here to here. It's basically like Germany to Croatia. That's what we're talking about. This is the Habsburg family crest. Look familiar?
Yes.
Two eagles. Looks like whose? Romanovs. This originated in India originally, this whole two-headed eagle family. The absolutists really like it. In other words, they're saying we're ancient like those Hindus. This is the family quote for the Habsburgs. Leave the waging of wars to other. But you, happy Austria, marry. What does that mean? Marry instead of waging wars? What does that mean?
So you get power.
No, it's more than diplomacy.
Live like a happy, peaceful life.
You live a happy, peaceful life. How?
Well, you don't conquer the lands through wars. You conquer it by, like, marrying
Yeah,
your
you
family.
don't conquer a land through war. You conquer it by marrying that ugly person who's the queen of that country. Like, that's just a better strategy. Instead of killing, just marry. And then you can be king of everything. It's a good strategy for them. They also ruled Spain, 1516 to 1700. What war kicked them out of Spain in 1700? War of Spanish Succession. They also, therefore, ruled Portugal from 1580 to 1640, because if you were king of Spain, you also invaded Portugal and you took that. And then they ruled half of Italy from 1559 to 1713. What war ended in 1713? Once again, the War of Spanish Succession. So, they ruled a lot of stuff. And then when you blow it up and you look at it like that, you're thinking, okay, that's pretty big. If the War of Spanish Succession had gone a different way, the Habsburgs would be much more powerful. Who won the right to control the Spain because of the War of Spanish Succession? Which family took it? Bourbon. So the Habsburgs has had that as well. So now we're talking about quite a bit of land here. These guys are fairly mighty. Now, if it's underlined, I think you should know it. Like Charles II of Spain, you don't have to know who he is. But I wanted to introduce you to this thing called the Habsburg lip or the Habsburg jaw. You see that funny looking little face?
Yeah.
They happen to have a little kind of facial deformity in the family. It's kind of a protruding chin. This is not a joke, but like Jay Leno, the night show host, he has it as well. I forget what you call it. It's called a proboscis or something like that. But because they intermarry over and over again, they kind of marry their cousins, this trait stays in the family. And eventually it gets really bad. So this guy, Charles II of Spain, had this Habsburg lip really bad. So bad that he could not chew or speak, and he would just drool all day. His jaw was essentially that didn't function. So if you ever see a king and they kind of have a funny looking jaw, you're thinking Habsburg. And that's a pretty good rule. Why does this happen? And if you look carefully at this, you're going to see it's because, like, here's someone, he's a Habsburg, and he has kids. And then here's another Habsburg over here, and they have kids, and then the kids get married to each other. In other words, you're marrying your first cousin. And if you do that over and over and over again, 500 times, from 1250 to 1815, biology says these traits are going to get concentrated in the family, probably not so good. And you know, your family tree should get broader, right? Like, look at theirs, it comes back. Right? It becomes more narrow. But like, you're my nephew and my son. It's kind of twisted. Okay, you know this stuff, you just don't know you know this stuff. Early modern Europe, let's go to the new monarchs. Who are the new monarchs that are relevant here? Well, you know who they are. They're called Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain. That's where this story starts. Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain are Spaniards. What is their family name? Trastamara. They are not Habsburgs. They get together, they have sex, they make a baby, and her name is Juana, or Joan, they sometimes call her in English. And she comes to be known as Juana la Loca. There she is, cute, but crazy. Why is she la Loca? Well, she's crazy. And why is she crazy? Well, a lot of reasons. We don't know exactly, but maybe it's because of all this inbreeding and stuff. They have a daughter, Juana la Loca, and they say, Juana, you are Trastama, you're great, you're going to be the Queen of Spain, etc., etc. But we have an idea. What if we married you into this other family of Austrians, these people called the Habsburgs? And she said, maybe. So they go over there and they look at a guy and they find a guy named Philip the Fair. Let's talk about Philip the Fair for a second. Fair can mean three things. What does the word fair mean?
White.
Beautiful, or white, like pale skin, or
Justice.
just. Look at this guy. Which one do you think it means?
White.
White is a great guess, but it is wrong. So what do you think it means now? Just, that is also wrong. This is the handsomest of the Habsburgs here, Philip. Philip the Fair. He's the looker in the family. They decide indeed to get married. When they get married, they're going to have an extremely important son. But however, he does eventually die, Philip the Fair. And his wife lives on. Why do they call her Juana la Loca? Well, eventually she just gets kind of crazier and crazier. When he dies, she has parts of his body embalmed and keeps them in like little jars of liquid so that she can still see him every day. And then every once in a while, when she misses him, she orders that his body be dug up and she cuddles his body like it's all decayed in his casket. So the love affair was in fact a deep one. Their baby is this guy, Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor. So his grandparents are Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain. It is the same family, essentially. That's his grandma and grandpa. You know everything about this guy already. I'll remind you. The year is 1516, 1 year before what? The Reformation. This guy's in charge of Europe. He's in charge of fighting the Reformation. And he is emperor until 1556. 1555, Peace of Augsburg, don't forget. In other words, the Schmalkaldic Wars. In other words, this guy's main job is to fight the Protestants. He is Charles I of Spain. But he's also the Holy Roman Emperor. He's both. So if you're in Spain, he's Charles I. But if you're talking about the Holy Roman Emperor, he's Charles V. Who's Charles I Holy Roman Emperor, by the way?
Spain.
Charles I Holy Roman Emperor. Who's that?
Oh,
Charlemagne. So he's taking the name of Charlemagne and he's saying, look, I'm Charlemagne S. I'm that big, I'm that important. I like that guy. That's his motto. You might see him referred to as Carlos as well, because he's Spanish. Because his grandparents are Isabel Ferdinand. Or they might even call him Carlos V. In other words, he's the fifth Charles. He's the fifth Charles, Holy Roman Emperor. Even though clearly in Spain he's Carlos I. So do you see how confusing this is going to get? And is he a Habsburg or is he a Trastamara? Well, I guess he's both. But we're going to call him a Habsburg. He rules over lots of Italy. And keep in mind, now that Spain, he's the king of Spain. When does Spain claim the Americas? What year? 1492, from the get-go. He's also now the leader of the Americas, because Spain has claimed the Americas. Everything west of that line in the Treaty of Tordesillas with Portugal. He's the guy that sacks Rome in 1527. His soldiers are German, therefore what is their religion in 1527? Lutheran, Protestant. So they get fed up a little bit with the Pope. Their biggest grievance, by the way, is they haven't been paid. The Pope still relies on the emperor for manpower. When his soldiers don't get paid, they invade Rome and take the Pope hostage. He's the guy that is going to win or lose the Schmalkaldic Wars. Lose. So in other words, the Lutherans are going to win the right to practice in their country. Look at him. What does he look like? Warrior. He sees himself as a soldier for God. A lot like those Jesuits from this time period. By the way, what's this stuff on the painting? What's this stuff? Shiny. So is this painted in Italy or in the north?
North.
North. This is that coin I showed you before. Charles V. See the Habsburg jaw? He's the guy from the movie when Martin Luther said, "I will not recant." He said, "No!" He's the first person about which was said, "El imperio en el que nunca se pone el sol," which means what? In his empire would never happen. The sun never sets. What does that mean? It means literally, his territory is so big. He's the king of all that stuff. In blue and in blue and red, right? Blue because he's the king of Portugal. Red because he's the king of Spain. Purple is the kind of German Holy Roman Emperor Austrian parts. I guess they must claim part of this too, the East Indies. In other words, at any given time, the sun is up in his empire. It's never night in his empire. Because if it's nighttime over here in the Americas, it's daylight over here in India. He controls it all. Arguably the most important, influential, powerful man in the history of the world. The history of the world. Look at how much territory this guy was in charge of just him. It's impressive. He eventually dies. In fact, actually, he quits the emperorship in 1556. After the Schmalkaldic Wars are over, he basically retires. Very rare for an emperor to say, "I don't want to be emperor anymore." But he does give it up. He does have a son. His son is Philip II of Spain. Now, Philip II of Spain is only the king of Spain. Philip II of Spain never becomes the Holy Roman Emperor. A new emperor does that after Charles V. But Philip II of Spain is still the son of Charles V. You've read about him as well. Do you have any recollection of who this guy is? The so-called most Catholic king. He marries Bloody Mary of England, absolutely. And what's his biggest military loss? Do you remember? Spanish Armada. This is the guy that gets it sunk. He's not necessarily responsible for that, but it is happening under his watch, so the buck stops there. He's considered the most Catholic king. In other words, he is saying Catholicism will always be the religion of Spain, always. He allies himself with the Catholic Church. He's Latin, Southern Europe, Western Europe. You know that the Catholics are going to be his stronghold. Reminding you of other things you read about in other units. The Netherlands revolted against Spain. They were a colony of Spain for quite a long time. They didn't get their independence till after the 30 Years' War. When did that end? 1648. So he is technically also the king of the Netherlands, essentially, or the ruler of the Netherlands, if not the king. He presides over them while they are his colony. I can think of several reasons why the Netherlands would want to revolt. Religion of the Netherlands is now what? I think it's Calvinist, but yes, you're right, Protestant. Language of the Netherlands is? Dutch, not Spanish. And then consider this. Mercantilism is the economic system of the day. Mercantilism. So Spain essentially owns the Netherlands. One thing that Philip II did was he created something called the 10th penny tax. What percentage is that? Every 10th penny? 10%. Everything that happened in the Netherlands, 10% of that money went directly to Spain. So you can see why these people would want to revolt. It's the same reason why America revolted in 1776. Who's the first president of America? George Washington. At the time of the Revolution, he was what? Why was he famous? Why was he chosen? He was a general. What was his claim to fame? Richest man in America. If Bill Gates started a revolution against Barack Obama, would you say it was about politics or about money? Richest man in America, George Washington. Think about it, people. George Washington, except for the slaves, you know.
No.
Bill Gates, except for the slaves. Spanish Armada is sunk in 1588. We don't have photos, obviously. This is one of the famous paintings of that. So Philip is kind of maybe one of the last most powerful kings of Spain. His empire is slowly crumbling. The Netherlands is going to revolt, the Armada is going to be destroyed, and it's going to be very hard to maintain this empire without boats. So Spain is really a kind of powerful in that early modern period, and then they lose it. We're going to fast forward way up until the 1700s. In other words, American Revolution times. In other words, the Enlightenment. And we're going to fast forward to 2 emperors, then we'll be done. The first one is Holy Roman Empress Maria Theresa, or Maria Teresa, or Maria Teresa, however you want to say her name. 40 years. What's the first thing you notice about her? She's a lady. She's the only Holy Roman Empress ever. This was a man's job. Maybe because it's religious, the Holy Roman Emperor. You rarely are tied to the Catholic Church, and maybe they thought a lady could not do this. How does she get her job? Let me tell you what happens. The year is 1648. The 30 Years' War, you're going to be reading about it tonight, ends. The Holy Roman Emperor, after 1648, is basically a loose collection of states, even looser than before, and the emperor has almost no authority. Her position is relatively weak, but she's still empress, and it's still a high-status position. How does she come to be empress? Her dad is the Holy Roman Emperor. One day, he eats some mushrooms, and the mushrooms happen to be poisonous, and he, dies. This is a big mistake on behalf of the cook. Because the emperor is dead, the other Europeans turn and they say, there's no heir to the throne. There's no sons here. Are we going to allow a woman to be empress? And some of the countries said, sure. And some of the countries said, hell no. And they literally went to war over whether or not this woman could be Holy Roman Empress. And we're going to call this the War of Austrian Succession. We're going to read about it probably next week. So it wasn't an easy job for her to assume. As soon as she fights the War of Austrian Succession, she is empress. She is empress. She gets to be empress for 4 years. But her main enemy during the War of Austrian Succession was a little state called Prussia, one of the states within the Holy Roman Empire. Her beef with them is going to go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, so she's going to have to go to war with them again. Austria and the Holy Roman Empire, how close together are they? They touch each other. So these fights are not only going to be over the fact that she's a girl, but they're going to be over the fact that these people would love to have this little piece of land that sits in between the two of them. I'll show you in a second. Some people consider her an enlightened monarch. What did we say these enlightened people are like? Why do we call them enlightened? No, that's an absolutist. What's an enlightened monarch?
More thinking, helping them.
More thinking, more rational, more Ben Franklin here. What does she do that's new, different, better? Well, for example, I told you that witchcraft was a big problem at this time. After the Protestant Reformation started, a lot of people, especially women, were accused of being witches and killed and burned, etc. She outlaws witch burning. She also outlaws capital punishment. You know what capital punishment is. Death for any crime. She's the first person within the Holy Roman Empire to get rid of that. And since the Holy Roman Empire is so damn big, now you have a lot of people living under a more just system. Minor fact, I just thought I'd throw it in there for you. One of the first public hospitals ever is created, the Vienna General Hospital. It is still the largest hospital in Europe. Think about that. So in other words, the belief here is what? If you're creating basically a public hospital. What's the belief?
Free healthcare.
Free healthcare, maybe not free, but that everyone's entitled to it. In other words, if you have something wrong with you, you don't just have to go to the barber anymore who takes out the scissors and chops off your fingers. Now that we should be living in a more rational, more fair society. Her kid is this guy, Holy Roman Emperor Joseph II. So as soon as she dies, he takes over. Now we got the empire back in the hands of a male. He'll be one of the last Holy Roman emperors. And you should be able to look at this guy and be like, yeah, way more George Washington. We're in a much more modern period of history. Maria Theresa has 12 kids. Guess how many of them died?
11.
6.
3.
The statistics are 50%. And that bears itself out perfectly in her case. She has 12 kids. Who's another one of her kids? She's a certain Duchess of Austria that will marry into the French family. She is the wife of Louis XVI of France. She's who?
Is it Napoleon?
We watched a movie with her last week. Marie Antoinette. So she is the mother of Marie Antoinette. Marie Antoinette was a Habsburg who married into the Bourbon family. All these people are going to be related. Aren't you so excited to draw a family tree for me later in the week?
Yeah.
Marie Antoinette cannot be empress because she's a girl. There are boys to take over the throne at this time, so Joseph II becomes Holy Roman Emperor. Some people consider him the most enlightened of the enlightened monarchs, and let me tell you why. The date is 1781. Think about what's going on in America in 1776, 1789, the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, etc. He grants religious freedom for all religions. All religions. So what's a religion that would now be acceptable? Judaism, even. So in other words, before it was Catholics, fine. Lutherans, okay, maybe. Calvinists, ugh. Zwingli, hell no. But now they're saying, okay, pretty much anything. Now you can't kill cats and worship Satan and all that, I would imagine. But to have total freedom of religion, fairly impressive. That predates America, because America's constitution is not written until 1789. He insists that all church services are in German, in the vernacular language. That way, any German could walk into any church and listen. So he's definitely trying to update the Holy Roman Empire. Who does he remind you of? Who's our Russian kind of updater? Peter the Great. And you're going to watch a Peter the Great movie later this week. Abolishes serfdom in 1781. In the empire. Now, if you're living in Poland, you can still be a serf. You remember what a serf is?
Yes.
Tied to land in law. The owner owns your life, literally. He gets rid of that. That's progressive, I think. Now, this is something that you guys struggle to understand. Stay with me and see if you can understand. Say bureaucracy. What is a bureau? In French. What is a bureau?
Town.
That's a bird.
Why'd
A
you...
borough literally means a desk. You know that ocracy means rule. So literally what we're talking about here is rule by the desk. In other words, this guy creates a bureaucracy. He creates a system of government where people have offices. That's very different from before. Before, if you wanted a law to be passed, who would you talk to? The king. And the king would say, yes. Or the king would say, no. Now you have a whole system where people, get chosen based on their merit. And then they say, we're going to create an office of taxation. And you guys are responsible for collecting taxes. And we're going to give you a little stamp pad, and a little seal, and a little chart, a little form, and a pen, and a file cabinet. And you are now going to create a more rational system of government. Best example of bureaucracy on this campus is something like the attendance office. You're absent. What do? Where does the bureaucracy start? What desk do you have to visit? Attendance desk. And what do you have to present them with? No, but then that has to be signed. Bureaucracy can kind of be tedious too. And then you sign them. And then maybe they give you a little admin. Or maybe they update a little bit of the computer. And then that shoots up here to my desk. It's supposed to be a more fair system. In other words, you don't just come in here and say, Mr. Ortega, I was absent. And I say, no, liar. And I defenestrate you out the window. In his years as emperor, and it's only 10 years, this guy issues 6,000 edicts. An edict is like a law that he can make. So he sees himself almost like a Roman. This is about the number of laws that ancient Rome had. In 10 years, that's what he does. 11,000 laws on top of that. So he wants a more rational society. In other words, what the American Revolution did to America, he did for the Holy Roman Empire all by himself. We're going to learn about Mozart soon. You know who Mozart is, the musician? This guy was a patron for Mozart, and you're going to learn that. He knew Mozart, he sponsored Mozart, he paid for Mozart, he hired Mozart. Mozart lived with him at courts at times. So when you see the movie later about Mozart, you'll be like, oh, okay, I get it. That's what I remember. Joseph. This is where I want to leave you with. This is the reason why I like Joseph II. Upon his deathbed, he said, I am unfortunate in everything I undertake. He was a man of modesty and humility. I like that about him. and where he was buried. This is the Habsburg family tomb, just for the royals, like the emperors and the kings and the queens and the dukes and the duchesses. There's no ornamentation or inscription other than his name. It doesn't say, here is Joseph II, the greatest human being ever. It just says, Joseph. This is the Habsburg family crypt, so you can see it. So in other words, all the emperors, Holy Roman emperors and all them, they're all buried here. And yet, of course, it's German, so it's got to be a little bit Gothic. Do you like this detail? Would you want to be buried under something like this?
Yeah.
Do you want to be reminded of death when you die? Or you want it to be all clean looking? Let me tell you what we're going to do. We're going to do some different stuff today.
Hello.
Find the pencil. You're going to get up, you're going to turn your desk. You're going to go find your group mates. The group side has